All right. We are ready. Well, welcome. This is week 7 of our Friday night Bible study on the book of James. Tonight should be an interesting discussion. We're actually talking about taming the tongue. So, lots. No. So, I'm just going to put this out there. As a disclaimer, nothing in here is aimed at anyone in particular. So if we get to that, just keep that in mind. And it's not necessarily a self-reflection either. So just keep that in mind too. All right, let's start with a word of prayer. Our dear Heavenly Father, we thank you once again for taking us to another week and bringing us to the Sabbath day. And as we enter the Sabbath day with Bible study, we ask that you'll send your Spirit to be with us and guide us in our study, give us wisdom and understanding. We thank you for asking these things in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, taming the tongue. See if this is going to work. There we go. All right, so the text we have that we're going to start with is actually from Matthew. It's Matthew 12:37. It says, "For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned." Now think about that for just a minute. When you hear that text, what does that sound like? What does that mean to you?
It's like a two-edged sword.
A two-edged sword? So it can be good or it can be bad, right? Either way, it can be really bad.
Careful.
Yeah, definitely be careful what you say. If you look at Matthew 12, there's a lot of parables in there. And it's also, where he talks about a tree is known by its fruits, and the scribes and the Pharisees ask for a sign. So Jesus is doing a lot of teaching in here. And this comes towards the end of the chapter, just before he launches into the Pharisees. It's the tail end where he's talking about the trees known by its fruit. So it's talking about how what your words reveal, because that's part of your fruit. That's going to reveal what your real character is like. So you learn to need to be careful there, or it may reveal something you may not even be aware of. All right. So we're going to start off here in chapter 3. So we finished chapter 2. James chapter 3, verse 1. So this will be the first text I'll have someone else read. Still trying to preserve my voice. And then we'll talk about the question. So as you read, just think about what important point is James making here about accountability. So chapter 3, verse 1, I have a volunteer. Okay, we'll go right around this way, so we'll start right here.
Be not many knowing that we shall receive greater condemnation.
Okay, I like that. My version is just a little bit different. What does yours say, Tanya?
Teachers, my brother, doing that as you in curious judgment.
All right. So that one, it carries a lot of meaning to me because I'm actually working as a teacher. I mean, I've been teaching Bible here at church for many years, but actually working as a teacher, I like the masters. It, of course, yeah. So it's more than just teachers, but leadership. Anytime you're in that position, it's talking here about accountability. It says, knowing that we shall receive a stricter judgment. So why would a teacher receive a stricter judgment? Influencing other people, right? I mean, people talk about, why Lucifer, Satan, why his punishment is going to be so severe is because he's the one that led everyone into sin. So he has influenced many, many beings. And as a teacher, people put a lot of weight in what you say. So I like to put disclaimers, don't take my word for it. Look it up. we talk something, I always tell you where the text is. If I don't know, I tell you I don't know. So let's see if we can figure it out. I don't want to lead anyone astray because that's some pretty serious responsibility. But it's very major point. So we need to take a look as we're going through this. Keep in mind that as we're learning these things, we have to be careful how we present it so that we're not leading other people astray. All right, so now we're going to look back. We're going to go look at Proverbs 9:10. We're going to compare that to James 1:5, which is the text we studied first week of this, and see what these texts combine, what it has to say about how we should regulate our speech. So, yeah, it's Proverbs 9:10. Okay, go ahead. Right. Fear of the Lord is beginning of wisdom, knowledge of the Holy One, understanding, and then compare that to James 1:5. Yeah, that's you. That's you, Paula.
Give it to me, guys.
All right. So what does that tell us about, how does that all tie into regulating speech?
Well, and he's saying, what's God's truth?
Right. You want to be saying what's true,
Yes.
right? So you want to be truth, and we know that real wisdom begins where? With God. And if you want wisdom, who do you ask it for? Who do you ask for it?
Yeah.
For God. Yeah, who do you ask it for? Well, we want wisdom for everybody. Yeah, wisdom for everybody. But you ask God for it. It comes from God. Wisdom starts with God. So we should be making sure that we're learning the truth. Because if you don't learn the truth, you can't speak the truth. All right. So now we're going to look at some positive. I think it's good to start with some positives. We will get into some negatives, but let's try to emphasize the positives as much power. Word power. You know, you've all heard that pen is mightier than the sword. I wouldn't want to put that to test in a sword fight, but you know, in life, the pen has killed a lot of people. A lot of people. Wars have been started over things that are written. And so that words do carry a lot of power. So we've got quite a few texts to look up here. Starting in the Old Testament, we're going to go all the way back to Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 6 and 7, and then 23, verse 23. Yes. You got that, Philip? Eventually? All right.
You didn't need to phone. Deuteronomy 6:6. And these words which I command thee this day shall be upon thy heart. And thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and shall keep them when thou sittest in the house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up.
All right. So what's a positive use of word power you see in this text? I mean, what are they teaching?
Teaching that.
They're teaching about God, right? The words which I command you today. So, and this is Deuteronomy. This is where Moses has given them pretty much a review of everything that he put them in the heart. And it's telling them to do this repeatedly, teach them diligently. Talk of them when you're in your house, when you're walking by the way, when you lie down, when you rise up. So whenever you can work it in, talk about it. And if you go to Deuteronomy 23:23, which is the next one. All right. Do you have that, Charlene? Oh, you got it? Okay.
Go on. That which is gone out of thy lips thou shalt observe and do, according as thou hast vowed unto Jehovah thy God, a freewill offering which thou hast promised with thy mouth.
All right. So here it's talking about putting words into action. Right? So you say it, then do it. Right? So words have a lot of power when you follow up with actions. We've all heard of empty promises. Right? That's a poor use of word power. And after a while, if you do that over and over again, people lose faith in what you say, and then your words have no power. It just goes in one ear and out the other. All right, let's look at Psalms 40, verse 3. Nicole, do you have that?
Yes.
Oh, you got that. Charlene's got that. Never mind, Nicole.
Yes. Many fear and fear.
All right, so here we have word power. It's having what kind of influence?
Leading people to trust.
Leading people to trust Christ, right? So that's a good use of word power. People will see, people will hear, and people will learn to trust God. All right, so Nicole, you do what?
Making it acceptable by the
Making it acceptable by music, yes. Many people, first exposure to scriptures is through songs. So I like to hear songs that have a good scriptural base. So when we listen to the Contemporary Christian channel a lot, and the songs that we like the most are the ones where you can tie directly to something from the Bible. Sometimes though, you get songs on there and yeah, it's a nice song, but it doesn't really have anything to do with the Bible. All right, go ahead.
Okay, Proverbs 10, 20, and 21.
Mm-hmm.
The sanctified choice heart quicken little. The lip fools die for lack of wisdom.
All right, like that. So it compares the words of the righteous to choice silver. So it's valuable, it's beneficial, right? So when you're speaking words, righteous words, it's helpful to people. Whereas the words of the foolish are what?
Well, the worth little and lack wisdom.
Worth little and lack wisdom. So they may say a lot, and it may even sound impressive and all that, but it's really not worth anything. In the long run, it's useless. And then Proverbs 12:25.
Irony and the heart of
All right, so I think a lot of people can relate to anxiety causing depression. But a good word, right? A word of encouragement can make you feel better. I know we went the last few years, it seemed like it was just bad news after bad news after bad news, and people got depressed. Anxiety levels are through the roof, and all kinds of problems evolved because of that. But when you see those little glimmers of good news, we see people who receive the good news, how they would have a different response. It's interesting to see when we go through those times, the people who do well compared to the people who don't, and what kind of input they're getting. What are they listening to? What are they seeing? What are they hearing? What are they saying? And how that affects them. And we could spend a whole session on that. We're not going to, but we could. Let's look at Malachi 2, 6, and 7. No, she doesn't? Okay. Oh, voice, yeah, that's right. We'll come back over here. Rodney? Yeah.
The law was in his mouth, and iniquity was not found in his lips. He walked with me in peace and equity, and did turn me away from iniquity. For the priest's lips should keep knowledge, and they should seek the law at his mouth, for he is the messenger of the Lord of lights.
Ooh. That's some good word power right there, right? Right. So what kind of words were coming out of his mouth?
Truth.
Truth. Truth, right? He was speaking truth. And he says he was actually acting as God's messenger, right? So he's delivering God's message, delivering truth. And that was beneficial to the people. So truth is always beneficial, even if people don't want to hear it. It's beneficial. Right? Because sometimes you don't know how bad things are until you hear the truth. And you can't change until you realize that.
So he says the law of truth.
The law of truth. Mhm. 10 Commandments are beneficial. Well, we've talked about that before when we talk about the law. And people say that, you're just being legalistic if you keep the law. It says, well, why wouldn't you want to keep the law? What would the world be like if everybody kept the law? Right? You would not need policemen. There'd be no crime. Right? Hospitals, well, you still have people get sick. You still have people have accidents. But think of how much less you would have. Think of all the people that go to the emergency room because of bad things that happen because of violence and people breaking those laws. So, I mean, the world would be a much better place if everybody kept those laws. Yeah. And if you look at most nations, if you look at their legal system, the laws they have in place, a lot of what's in the 10 Commandments is echoed in their laws. I mean, that's the basis for most of our laws these days, which people don't like to admit that, but it's the truth. All right, so now we're going to go to the New Testament. We're going to go to the book of Luke, Luke 4:22. Luke 4:22, and I think we're to Tyann. All right, so here, obviously, we're talking about Jesus, and notice how they describe the words that Jesus was using. They're talking about gracious. So I think it's important to understand that sometimes, even though we're speaking the truth, how we say it can be just as important as what we're saying. You can be speaking the truth and you can say it hatefully, and that causes harm. Jesus was gracious. He was known for gracious. Even those who were trying to find fault and trying to find a way to get at him had a hard time disputing not just what he said, but how he said it, which sometimes, I mean, it didn't really help them that much, but they had no recourse, right? No legitimate reason to go after him. So they had to make stuff up. But so how we say things is just as important as what we say. And I think about in my job having to deal with teenagers from parts of towns that many of us don't like to even drive through, from people who live in situations that we have a hard time even imagining, and the way that they behave and act and talk is sometimes a little disturbing. But when I talk to them, if I stoop to that level, right, if I don't stay gracious and forthcoming, then they just shut down. They won't listen to anything I have to say. So it's hard to teach them if you act that way. So you have to have that certain behavior. So it's interesting how that works, not just in a religious atmosphere, but even out in the real world when you're just dealing with day-to-day things. All right, last one we're going to look at here is Romans 10, 6 through 8.
Okay. But the right faith speaks in this way. Do not say in your heart, who will ascend into heaven? That is to bring Christ down from above. Or who will descend into the abyss? That is to bring Christ up from the dead. So what verse 3? Okay. But what does it say? The word is near you, even in your mouth and in your heart. That is the word of faith if we preach.
All right, so that was an interesting text. But it's talking about speaking the word of faith, right? The word that's coming from the heart. And of course, who puts that in the heart? God does, right? So the word of faith, what that we preach, has got to come from God, come through the heart. We're not just making stuff up. Come out here and say, well, this sounds good. This is what I'm going to say today. That's a very, very poor way to preach, if you will. All right. So what do all these, we put all these texts together, what do they tell us about how careful we should be of our words?
We need to be very careful of what we say
Okay, we have to be careful about what we say
and how we say it.
and how we say it, right? Also, it's talking here about the words coming from the heart. So the words should be, our intention should also be clear. We shouldn't be, even if we're saying the right thing, if we're saying it for the wrong intention, or you can sugarcoat it however much you want. Yeah.
That's
Yeah. Well, you've heard the expression, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason.
Yeah.
Or we should listen twice as much as we talk. Yeah. But you know how most conversations go?
Mhm.
The person is waiting for you to pause so they can start talking.
But what are they?
They're thinking about what they're going to say instead of what you're saying.
Like,
Yeah.
legs.
Yeah. It usually does not go well. Yeah. We've all been in conversations like that, though. And we've seen it. It's funny when you look at the debates on TV, there's a lot of political debates going on right now. I'm not going to talk about them other than say everyone that's up there, they're not paying any attention to what the person says. They're waiting for their chance to talk. And then they're just going to jump in and say what they want to say. And that's not debate, right? There's no back and forth other than that they're constantly calling each other names and things. They're not worth watching anymore, in my opinion. You're not going to learn anything new. All right. All right, so we're going to move into a topic. James brings out some interesting things here. So the little things are the big things. We think about that. A lot of times when we talk about doing big tasks, we know it's too big and we break it down into smaller chunks and we do it that way. Well, speech can be similar. So let's read down. For some reason, we're skipping verse 2. I don't know why we did that. Was that me doing that? Or was that them? I like verse 2. So let's read verse 2 through 5 instead of 3 through 5 like I have on the slide. I don't know why I did that. I think probably that's how it was in the outline I was looking at. All right, so where did we leave off?
I think we have.
You? Okay. You were last? So that would be Lydia then? You're looking, James chapter 3. Yeah. Okay. James chapter 3, we're going to start at verse 2 instead of verse 3. So verse 2 through 5.
For we are all stumble in many things. If anyone does not, he is a perfect man, able also to bridle the whole body. Indeed, we put vice forces, not that they may obey us, and we turn their whole body. Look also at ships, although they are so large and are driving by winds, they are turned by the very small, rudder, whatever the pilot decides. Even so, the town is a little member and boasts great things. See how great a forest a little fire burns.
Okay. So see, James here, he's talking about how little things have big influence. Now, in the body, the tongue is not that big. Some people seem to have huge tongues, but I mean, it's not that big. But notice he's talking here, though. He says, if anyone does not stumble in word, he's a perfect man. Because if you can have perfect speech, then you can control everything else. Because evidently, that's the hardest thing to control. And then it talks across horses. We have any horse riders in here? People who's ridden horses? Horses? Used to, yeah. It's been many years since I've been on a horse. But the bit, it's that little piece of metal they stick in the mouth, and you just a little tug on the reins one way or the other, and the whole horse will turn one way or the other. At least that's the theory. Last time I was on a horse, it didn't work too well. But that's the story where, it was the big draft horse that they stuck a saddle on and put me on, and that ended badly. So that's another story for another day. It's amusing, to say the least, and no serious injuries, so I'm still here. I'm still here. All right. And then talks about ships. Of course, you've seen these huge vessels, and they steer them with these rudders at the back end. Usually it's, in comparison to the whole ship, it's very small. I mean, the rudders on these huge aircraft carriers are massive, but compared to the whole aircraft carrier, they're not very big. A very small portion of it. And then, of course, talking about starting a forest fire. What's it take to start a forest fire? A little spark. One spark's all it takes. Right? So it doesn't take much to get into trouble with the tongue. Right? Not much at all. One wrong word at the wrong time in the wrong place can cause big problems. No. Cannot take it back. Once you put it out there, it's out there. And that's so important. And you think about job interviews. These people, I mean, you're in here, your resume's in there with all these other people, and you have this wonderful resume. But if you don't do a good interview, you don't get the job. It all comes down to your speech and your communication. Right? It's very important that you learn to control those things. Those little things can cause you big problems. So let's think about what are some of the little things in our life that as you dwell further on them might not be so little. What are some examples of some little things that can cause big problems? Or not necessarily a big problem. What are some little things that can be a great advantage? Jealousy? All right. Jealousy can blow up pretty quickly. Yeah.
And back to your, you may not know someone in your street. Maybe they're having a really bad day, maybe you got a really bad try, and you spend things. That sometimes can change how it feels, or maybe they're mad about something, and that can also bring their father to somebody else.
So I like that. A simple thing like a smile can be a huge difference. A kind word at the right time can really make somebody's day. Little things. Opening the doors. Yes. Yeah, that's interesting. I have a habit of opening doors for people and holding them open. Something I just grew up doing. In all my life, I've only had one person get mad at me because I opened the door for them. They got mad at me. Yeah, it was interesting. The person behind them was wondering what their problem was. I'm like, I don't know. But you're welcome to come in too. I'm holding the door for you too. So.
Makes people smile.
Yeah. A little thing. Usually a thank you or at least a nod or a smile or something, right? So little things can make a big difference, positively or negatively. Right? What if you come in, someone asks you how, or you ask someone how they're doing and they're just frown, or we talked about, I think last week, about people don't really want to know when they ask that question. A lot of people don't. I try not to ask that question too much, because, especially around some people, because I know there's a long answer coming. If I know there's something specific going on, I may ask them about that specific thing. If I'm really wanting an answer and I have the time to talk about it, otherwise I try to steer clear of those kind of conversations. Not that I'm not willing to hear and listen. I just have to make sure I have the time to actually do it. Right. So, but yeah, just think about it. When someone comes in and they just all gloomy, right? You can see their expression that they've got a frown on, and the first word out of their mouth is like, "I just can't believe that this is going on." What's that do to your mood? Brings it down, right? It has a negative impact on you. It starts draining your energy. And we don't want to be doing that to other people, right? We want to be bringing the energy up, making people feel good, as much as possible. Now, sometimes you have to deliver bad news, and bad news has never made anyone feel good that I know of. But the way you deliver it can lessen the blow. So little things can make a big difference. Now, don't go out and start delivering good news with a bad news with a smile because we're trying to soften the blow. That's not appropriate either.
Right.
Right. So let's move into the area of damage control. Because again, if we go back up to verse 2, it says we all stumble in many things, right? So we're human. Occasionally something slips out, and then it becomes necessary to do a little damage control.
I think because the person is trying to be understanding. Don't jump out and leave that. I'm trying to. I go to responses. Somebody to describe.
What would Jesus do? Yeah. And I usually think about that after I've done something he wouldn't have done. And I'm like, well, he probably wouldn't have done that. What would he do in this situation? Well, I don't think Jesus would get in this situation. Right? But yeah. Well, let's go down. We've read all the way through verse 5. If we look at verse 6, James is really kind of stoking the fire, literally stoking the fire here. I'll read this one because I've been just passing it around. I'm going to read this one. It says, James 3:6, and the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. The tongue is so set among our members that it defiles the whole body and sets on fire the course of nature, and it is set on fire by hell. So James feels pretty strongly about, people who don't control their tongues. But think about it. Even Jesus said, what defiles the body is not what goes in the mouth, what comes out. And what comes out of the mouth? Right? It's our words, right? So the question here is, what is James saying here about the power of our tongue, of our words to defile everything about us? Yeah.
Why would you say, well, if you let.
True. It's been my experience, and we all have seen it, where there's certain people, when you see them coming, like you may find a reason to be somewhere else, right? Say, let me go check the book rack over here, or let's make sure the trash can doesn't need to be empty. Or you'll find something to do, some reasons, a legitimate reason to do something else. I have literally crossed the street to avoid running into someone before. I felt a little bit guilty about it afterwards, but then I said, well, I just don't need that. Right. Now, it's not saying that you should purposely spend your whole life trying to avoid these people, because these people need encouragement too. But there are times and places for that, and sometimes you just need to avoid that. But you don't want to be that person that people cross the street to avoid, right? You don't want to be that person. And then if you look at what it's saying here, he's talking about this defiling the whole body. So what comes out of your mouth, it reveals who you really are. So if you say, well, I just wasn't thinking, I thought that out. Well, when you're not thinking, you're just speaking what you're feeling, which is what's coming. I mean, it's who you are. So now you're human, which means sometimes you're not going to be feeling the way you normally would or normally should. So even I shouldn't say perfect, even the best of Christians are going to have those moments when something may slip out, and it puts you in a really bad spot, because now, especially if it's somebody you're trying to witness to, right? You imagine that, or you may not even know they're there and something just slips out and they were standing behind you.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, your influence has gone from up here to down here. Or maybe they were really worldly and they say, hey, I knew you knew some of those words, right? And now, hey, you're one of us now. And then it's a bad way, because now they don't care what you have to say about that. They want to drag you into what they're doing, right? So it can be a bad situation. All right, so let's read on. See if he's got any advice for us. So I read verse 6. So let's just reread verse 6 and include 7 and 8 this time with whoever's next. Philip? Okay. Let's say I lost my place.
And the gods of fire rolled iniquity among our members, which defiled the whole body, set it on fire with fuel of nature, and set on fire by hell. Verse 7, for every kind of beast and birds, and creeping things and things in the sea is tamed, and hath been tamed in kind. But the tongue can no man tame. It is a restless evil. It is full of every prison.
Whew. All right, so think about that. We've tamed virtually every critter you can think of. I mean, think you can go down to the zoo and see them with elephants, and of course it's a small. The elephant keepers are not very big, especially compared to the elephant. And they'll come over and they'll tap them up in the leg and they'll lift the leg up. Right, they'll just give them a little tap here. The elephant could squash them, but they have been trained to behave a certain way by those zookeepers. And at the same time, we can do that with animals, but we can't control this thing. Right? We can't control that. Right. So the question we ask here, so why should the thoughts in these verses make us be so careful with what we say? And how can we learn to appreciate the power for good or evil contained in our mouths? Any thoughts? Everyone's afraid to speak. No, I like this. This is a good example. Everyone's thinking before speaking, right? Which is a good response. It's a good thing to do. We need to be very careful because if you don't take the time to think about what you're going to say and how you're going to say it, you could just rattle something off, right? It's just running wild, and who knows where that will go, right? Who knows?
And we do, like the last said, we have to understand the power that our tongue has with what we speak, how you can speak in a godly way, or you can speak where evil comes of it, and you don't want to do that. And you may inadvertently, if you talk before you think, inadvertently, you may do that, may harm someone that you didn't need to. It can be like you said, it could even be a Christian being too, maybe with their tongue being way adamant or something that might turn someone who they were trying to help on God, learn about God, and they turn them away.
Yeah.
I could say that.
Yeah, it could. I've gone door to door with someone who said nothing but the truth. And said it with, I think, the proper intention, but the way they said it was complete turnoff. Right, come up there. I mean, you're introducing yourself to the neighbors, and the person comes to the door and they're smoking a cigarette. It's their house.
Yes.
You're knocking on their door. They don't know you from Adam. That is not the time to lecture them on the evils of smoking. Right? No matter how you say it, it's not going to be well received. So, no, not the first point. At that point in time, I might step back a little bit so I don't breathe it in. But it's their house. I'm going to, try to have a conversation with them. Right?
Meet them for sure.
Absolutely. Meet them where they are. Again, it's like the analogy, the canoe in the lake. You're coming up alongside their canoe. Talk to them. Now, don't get in the water with them. Stay in your canoe. But try, even if they're swimming around, you can talk to them and maybe get them in your canoe later. You don't want to cause an accident right there. So it's just interesting. And you think about this, talk about how many people or how many times you've met someone who always had an immediate answer. they just want to answer right away anytime you ask a question. I know if you're thinking about that, there's probably someone coming to mind right now. And after they give you that answer, you're wondering, is that right? Right? I mean, because they didn't take any time to think about it. I mean, I had a doctor's appointment this last week, and to his credit, he was talking to me. I asked him a question. He stopped for a minute. He says, "Let me look that up." And he actually looked it up. He took a minute. He says, I'm pretty sure I understand the medicine on this, but I'm not sure about the procedure. So he looked it up, gave me the answer. She actually showed me on the screen where the answer was. Yeah. Well, this doctor's he's been my doctor for, yeah, since I had that foot injury in 2009. Yeah. So 14 years. Yeah, he was the one that caught the cancer. Yeah. And made me promise never to skip an appointment again. Oh, yeah. He brings that up every now and then. So, yeah, he's a good doctor. I like him. But yeah, when people do that, you just kind of wonder. I would much rather have them do like the doctor said. Let me look it up. Right? If someone asks you something you don't know, it's okay not to know. You're not a walking, talking encyclopedia, right? I may be an elder at the church and I've been teaching the Bible a long time. Do I know everything in this book? No, I don't. Otherwise, I wouldn't find something new every time I read it, right? And so that tells me there's a lot in here I don't know. I mean, this is a big book. It's a big book. There's a lot in there. So you don't have to know everything. You should know where to go to find the answer, but you don't have to have the answer. Right? So don't feel like you need to. Right? We're almost done. So I'm excited. We're actually going to make it all the way through a lesson. All right. So we're going to go down to James 3, 9 through 12. If I get someone to read that for us. Where am I? We're over here. Philip and Charlene. All right, Charlene.
Men who have been made in the similitude of God. Out of the same mouth proceeded blessing and cursing. My brother, these things does a spring some water and bitter in the same company? Can a fig tree, my brethren, bear olives, or a grapevine bear figs? Thus, no spring yields both salt water and fresh.
Yeah. It's funny when I read this, when I was studying this before this lesson, the phrase that came to my mind, and we've all heard it, you kiss your mama with that mouth. You think about it, you've heard that, right? I've used that at school with some of the kids. Because the words I hear. Yeah, it's But yeah, that is a Southern saying. It is a Southern saying. Yeah. So it's funny. So I'm telling on myself, that I spent most of my life in the South. But yeah, when you think about it, you shouldn't be. I mean, if you're filled with the Spirit, and we've studied, we all want to be filled with the Spirit, then the words that come out should be words inspired by the Spirit. You shouldn't be over here. I mean, imagine the pastor. He got here and he's giving this beautiful sermon, and then he comes back here to potluck, right? And then we hear something completely different, right? How would that make you feel about the pastor if he did that? Now, our pastor doesn't do that, right? I would be shocked if anything like that actually happened. I'm not saying he's perfect. I'm sure he has moments, just like the rest of us. But, I mean, how would that make you feel about that person if they did that?
You like this guy, he said,
Maybe that wasn't.
there'd be conflict in my own.
Yeah, there would definitely be some conflict.
It'd be like,
Definitely be some conflict. In the same way, if you're like that with people, right? I mean, Jesus said, right, you know them by the fruits. So we're getting back here. What's this truth? Does James illustrate using the fountain, the fig tree, and the grapevine? So if we look back at this, he's talking, see if I can find the right spot here. Does a spring send forth fresh water and bitter from the same opening? Well, think about that. If you've ever been where a spring where it's coming up out of the ground, I've been to quite a few of those. usually the water coming out, it's either good or bad. It doesn't switch,
Right.
right? What was the other one you had? The seed and the fig tree. Yeah, fig tree. Can it bear olives?
No,
No, right? Figs. It's the only thing you'll never get
right,
olives off a fig tree or figs off an olive tree, right?
right.
So it always should bear the same thing. So if you have this coming out of you, right, this bad stuff coming out of you, then you're not really filled with the Spirit. You're not moved by the Spirit. You're in that state where you need the Spirit desperately.
The problem is, you see this, oh,
Mm-hmm.
we know. I'm sorry. But people can change. That's what God is all about.
Yes.
Knowing Jesus is all about. But then years later,
Mm.
they're getting filmed from something they said 10 years ago, and
Or later. Yeah.
Or later.
Longer.
now getting that this change. That may not be how they feel. They may have had an experience. So
Yeah.
it's me when
Yeah.
something's brought up from 20 years ago that's someone said.
Yeah. I have trouble with that too. They bring up something that somebody wrote or said in the 80s. I'm like, man, that's 40 years ago.
Yeah.
Right. I don't care what he said in the 80s. Now, if he's still saying it now, then it's relevant.
Yeah.
Now, if he was saying it last week, that's relevant. But
We need to give people credit that they can have an experience and have a life change.
yeah. So you do need to keep that in mind. Yes, we shouldn't be judging other people anyway, but bear in mind that if you are looking at somebody's words, and there are times when that's appropriate, like, if you're interviewing for a new pastor, we went through that process. I would look at employers when you're looking for jobs. Well, not many of us are going to be in that situation, but most of us are hopefully in our last job. Well, Kayla's just getting started, so hopefully Kohl's is not her last job. Not that it's a bad job. We love Kohl's. I spent a lot of money there. Most of my Christmas attire came from Kohl's, but anyway, I digress. But you should put some weight on a person's record, but you need to be consistent. It's like, to Charlene's point, don't look at something they did 20 years ago if it's not consistent with how they're acting today, because people do change. And I wouldn't want someone to look at my behavior 20 years ago and assume that I'm that same person. Because, we all should be moving down that road. So hopefully a year from now, you're not the same person you are today. Not that any of you are bad people today, but we want to keep getting better and better. Right. So it's some good point James makes there. And this is the last slide. So here's a question we're going to close on. The problem with words is that for most of us, they come out so easily. And they do, right? If you doubt that, just wait for someone to cut you off on the interstate. Words come out easily, right? So often, too, they come out almost before we even have a chance to think about what we're saying. Because this is true, how can we learn to think carefully before we open our mouths? So how do we develop that? Because it's not our natural instinct. Pray about it.
For help.
Yeah.
Because that is not naturally.
Yeah, maybe if you see that person coming at you, instead of crossing the street, pause and say, Lord, you better give me some words. Give me some words. Help me be, that's a good time to ask, what would Jesus do? And then ask God to help you do what Jesus would do. Yes, it should become a habit, something you're doing consistently. Maybe pause. When you're in a conversation with someone and they pause, don't jump in right away. Maybe count to 10. Think about what they said. I know most of us, I say count to 10, you're going to be thinking about counting to 10, and then you're going to say what you're going to say. But take a pause, think about what they said, let it soak in, and then respond. Respond to what they said and then say what you need to say. And maybe that'll help the conversation. It'll be a whole lot less arguments, I think, going on that way, because they can see that you're honestly listening and that you're interested. Now, you're showing interest in what they actually had to say. You're showing that what they say matters to you. And then you respond. They're more likely to listen to what you have to say. Does it always work? No. But, we can't control what other people do. We should try to control what we do.
There's a help, that's,
It may not.
you know what I mean, but we don't.
Think about the influence. That's how you build influence. If they know that you're someone who listens without judging first, and not that you're not judging, but you're not just judging them right off the bat. You're listening first, thinking about it, and then responding. They're more likely to come to you with questions and concerns rather than just writing you off. And again, we want to be someone who is attractive. I'm not talking about physically. Physically is good, though. But, we want people to be attracted because we're giving off that same vibe that Jesus gave off. Right? So that's, again, I don't have the ultimate advice on that. My life has not been one of a controlled tongue. I'm much better at it now, but it hasn't always been that way. But I do find if I pause before I speak, that does help. You can ask Nicole, usually the times I don't pause, I just respond. It's usually not the best response. So she's still with me, though. So. I haven't had that major faux pas, Yeah. Sometimes my pause is, what'd you say? Because I honestly didn't catch it all. We have this bad habit. If she's reading or I'm reading, I'm sorry, you said something? I wasn't paying attention. I apologize. But anyhow, asking Jesus to help you, asking, praying to God, give you the words. Because he says, he who lacks wisdom, James said, pray to God. Because he's the source of all wisdom. So that's a good step. We made it to the end. First time in, mark this date on the calendar. Right? We made it to the end. Anyone have any questions before we close? Statements, nothing? Okay. We're all controlling the tongue. I like that. All right. Well, let's bow our heads for prayer, and I'll let the choir members get off the choir, and I'll work on cleaning up in here. Our dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this lesson tonight. We know how vital it is and how difficult it is for us to control the tongue. We cannot do it on our own. Lord, we ask that you will give us the patience to listen, give us the thought to pause, and to ask for guidance from you. Lord, make this a consistent thing in our lives. Help us to depend on you. Give us that wisdom so that we will know what to say and when not to say anything at all. Lord, we thank you for asking these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you.
Right.